Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jensen, continuing with Module 3. This is Media and Crime Control Part 2. So we're going to be focusing more on the courts and law. So first of all, we have to think about using media to do case processing in the criminal justice system. So consider the ways that media-related technologies can be used in various stages of cases and court processing. These could be things like electronic records and surveillance to tools that help in investigation and arrest. So we have things like live link videos for early court hearings, and I've actually sat in on many of those with clients that I've had in drug court, where we're doing a meeting before a judge using video computer technology, where basically the offender is sitting in front of a laptop and streaming a video straight to the judge, and the judge is in the judge's chambers streaming a video back. So we'll use this quite a bit to save time and kind of eliminate some of the logistical issues with having to pull the courtroom together, especially if it's for things like initial appearance, bail hearing or arraignment, or even just postponement of hearings. And that way we maintain the contact and connection to the offender as required by law, but we don't have to do it in person. We also use electronic records and monitoring for pretrial release. So we do a little bit of surveillance and monitoring to make sure that people are behaving the way they should be if they're going to appear in court later. We also use media for court reporting of adversarial hearings that need not be transcriptions. So most of the time we just have written records that come from the court stenographer. This can actually record live what happens in a court setting, which is determined by the judge. We also use media to present evidence, like what happened at a crime scene, and showing tapes, images, footage of what occurred at the scene. And then certainly we use media in correctional use, where we use it for record keeping, monitoring, and surveillance. But first, let's focus on media-conducted hearings. So we have to ask ourselves a central question: how different are media-conducted hearings from traditional ones? Well, there's a minimal gap for initial appearance and bail arraignments like we talked about, but the gap gets a little bit larger when there is production of evidence and things like the back and forth with direct and cross-examination, especially before juries. And so can we really video everything? And that's kind of a question that many courts are struggling with today, especially when you need a live exchange or a live challenge to procedural rules that are sometimes a little bit harder to get over a video due to logistical connections and volume and some of those things that maybe the judge or the jury cannot hear you well, and other sorts of things. And then again, how important is traditional face-to-face confrontation in order to ensure due process and actually search for the truth? And so this is where we're kind of left saying we could kind of do video conferencing for everything in life if we wanted to, but we might conduct ourselves differently if we have onlookers over here in the jury box, if we have family out in the jury, or if we're experiencing a stronger emotional connection or response to a judge or an attorney. So we have to think about our response to video versus our response to live interaction. We also have some implications of digital manipulation of images. So this is where we're asking judges, juries, and attorneys to become media experts to making sure things aren't doctored or edited to distort the truth. So we have things like simulation, enhancement, cropping, and retouching, editing done with greater ease and sophistication than ever before. And so we're questioning some of what is presented through media. Seeing may not be believing, and we may have a growing mistrust of images. And so it really requires that judges become more knowledgeable about it, or find some kind of subject matter expert that can verify the media images and presentations. So what kind of expertise is actually needed to determine the integrity of images? And you could ask this question next year and the answer might be different because, again, digital technology is so sophisticated and complex and constantly changing. So then legally, what is the challenge for judges who rule on the admissibility of visual evidence, whether it can be allowed in court? And then we kind of also have sometimes juries participating in this manner, where is there a CSI effect? Does crime scene investigation presentations create expectations about offers of evidence and what we should be able to see and what's actually recoverable? Sometimes CSI makes us think that every crime scene has a DNA and that every DNA gathered from a crime scene is analyzed and that we can get exact matches. That doesn't happen. Human beings make matches, not computers. So sometimes we have a distortion of what actually happens in crime scene investigation. We also have system maintenance issues for criminal justice. So will a media-conducted hearing lead to an impersonal assembly line justice where people feel kind of overlooked or feel rushed through the system that should be considering their rights? Will media-based technologies alter the working relationships among prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and others? Will plea bargaining be altered as far as them feeling like they can negotiate for verdicts? Also, will government have an edge over indigent defendants because of resource bases? You know, when we think about people that don't have access to media or aren't as familiar with media, will this create, you know, some kind of resource over someone that doesn't have it? We have populations that aren't as connected as we think. We kind of think everyone has access to the internet and everyone has a computer in their home, and that's simply not true. Not everyone has smart devices with the same capabilities. Some people are very isolated. We have language isolation. We have physical isolation. So we have to think about how that plays out as far as fairness. Some other issues that occur are, will the symbolic authority of court be demystified when proceedings are open to media technologies? So are people going to see the judge differently? Will legitimacy and deference be diminished as far as people thinking something's authentic? Will the loss of face-to-face time lead to some alienation on the part of any number of courtroom work group people? Will we have less understanding of system logic or less support? Will technologies democratize the court system and increase public awareness? Maybe people will participate in court more, feel more obliged to accept a jury summons. What parallels are there with technologies and news coverage? And so we think about things like diminished gatekeeping, where we're more careful with privacy and sharing. Are we going to focus only on the dramatic, and is this going to end up polarizing groups, again, who do or do not have access to certain resources? We can also look at media use outside the courtroom and out in the field. So these are the questions that we have about media-based technologies outside of court. So things like law enforcement encounters, using media for bookings and identification procedures. So when we think about video capture and policing, this is a fascinating area to study. So videotaping largely happens through law enforcement cameras installed in patrol cars, or we call them dashboard cams. We also have body cameras that are worn on uniforms. So then the question becomes, what are the procedural rules with this of when a law enforcement officer is supposed to push play or leave it running, or when can it be stopped, and what do cameras actually miss in a law enforcement officer-citizen field encounter? And how are those films archived or stored or disseminated? Will videoed matters receive more weight because it appears to be a more authentic encounter? And can officers adjust a little bit so some of the interaction is outside of their viewing range? So maybe they can self-edit by having people step over here, and then all of that interaction and activity is not actually captured on the camera because the angle has changed. Also with video capture and policing, you have things like videotaped interrogations, and we have to think about those rules about when starting and stopping recording are necessary because of potential manipulation. We did have a Canadian study that showed that videotaping actually helps reduce those unwarranted allegations of law enforcement misconduct, and it improves the accountability of the interrogation process. It also can aid with admissibility of confessions in court, and it does not really alter the likelihood of getting a confession, having a recording or not. It also can free interrogators from note-taking, which filters information. So think about it, anytime you have to sit and write something down, you have to make decisions about how to capture it and how much. But this makes it so we don't have to worry about that subjectivity. It also records suspect behaviors that give some insight into the mental state or frame of mind of the accused or the suspect or offender. Then we can look at also video and identification. So sometimes we use procedures to do formal lineups of a group of people, one of whom may be the suspect, where we have kind of a one-way glass mirror where we can have someone say, yep, that's the person, and identify them. We also have something that we call show-ups, and this is arranging for witnesses and suspects to be in the same location to see if the witness identifies them, again, used in nonviolent crimes. But it's unlikely to be affected by videotaping since they're both physically together anyway. But we also use photo and picture-based identifications. And again, it's interesting to see how cell phone image sharing and video sharing can assist in that. At the end of the day, we have to think about procedural and legal rights when we think about media in the courtroom. We have to ensure that due process is followed and that people have a right to counsel. These are requirements by the Constitution that cannot be violated. If they are, it means that the identification may be inadmissible by the judge, and it may taint subsequent identifications and really kind of make the entire trial process incredibly difficult. At any stage, due process is violated if its procedure is unduly suggestive, if we feel like there's unfair influence, or that there's some editing, or that it's actually influencing a witness, a victim, or someone on the stand in some manner. So it still requires that we adhere to the rules and procedures of the courtroom, and that the judge calls balls and strikes, just like they are asked to do. Also, post-arraignment and official charging, not necessarily arrest charges. The right to counsel applies so identifications can be suppressed if the right to counsel is violated. So we have to think about how that works as well. And finally, videos can be used for lineups and photo identification. So videos can give us a better selection of possible suspects for witnesses to describe. It's easier to finger someone if you don't have to, maybe wrongly, if you don't have to go through a traditional lineup routine. And if it's kind of depersonalized, do we think this will impact outcomes? We just don't necessarily have a lot of research to help us know that answer. So for photo identifications, we have something that we call video mugshot books, or mug books, that can be used so that witness-provided descriptions can be used to search and match and possibly find suspects more efficiently. And there is a social science literature emerging on these factors related to accurate and inaccurate identifications. And again, we're anxious to see how these findings play out and what is supported and not supported. So hopefully you find this helpful, and we'll see you next time.